Welcome back to Backpacking TV, everybody. I am Eric HANSON, your host here on the channel. And today I thought I would humble myself a little bit by telling you some tales of woe and my worst mistakes that I have made as an expert backpacker. So I have spent 3 years as a guide. I've spent many years on trails and backpacking, and yet with that much time in the pocket, I have had quite a few mistakes that I've made, and this is not mistakes that I've made as a newbie. These are mistakes I made out of confidence. And so I wanted to tell you the tales so that you could learn from them and not repeat the same mistakes. Before we get into the video, I want to give a shout out to Mystery Ranch. They have a brand new lineup of backpacks coming out called the Bridger series. They have a 65-liter pack and a 55-liter pack, and they are awesome backpacks. I've gotten to use them in advance, and I really think that they are special. So if you want to check those packs out, look up mysteryranch.com, and I think you won't be disappointed. Let's get into the video of mistakes I've made as an expert backpacker. First up on my list of mistakes has to do with water. One tale of not enough water and one tale of too much water. So the first mistake I made was taking a backpacking trip with some buddies here in Arizona in a place called Sycamore Canyon. Now, I've been to other parts of Sycamore Canyon before, and there was lots of flowing water. So I just assumed that when I took this backpacking trip that there was going to be plenty of water in this canyon. However, this 3-day backpacking trip ended up becoming kind of a nightmare and a sufferfest, and actually got a little bit dangerous because where we went into the canyon, there was no water whatsoever. And it turns out that the spring that I had been enjoying down canyon was down canyon. And so it was not available to me. The mistake there that I made was not verifying my water sources. I'm sure that there would have been information available from other blogs or just internet help about where I was going, and that people would have let me know, or I could have found out pretty easily that the location that I intended to go backpacking was actually bone dry. Now, we did survive, but we were literally just going from mud hole to mud hole, and it was pretty miserable, and I got thoroughly dehydrated, and I don't recommend doing that. So, especially if you're going backpacking in the desert, it's best to try to look it up and verify your water sources. And on the other end of the spectrum, I've made the other mistake of taking too much water, not having enough food to go with my water. This was in Southwest Colorado, and I did 15 miles in one day without enough food and ended up coming down with a case of what people call hyponatremia. That's too much water. So if I don't balance out my salts with the water intake, I actually became quite delirious. I was stumbling around. I was trying to find my way after dark. My dog Kovu was with me, and he had to actually take over route finding responsibilities. He could sense that I was in trouble because I was only just drinking water, and I wasn't eating enough food to go with it. I actually made the side mistake was I didn't pack food for this adventure, and it just wasn't enough. So that led me to get dangerously overhydrated with not the right amount of salts. Hyponatremia is actually a major cause of problems because most people go backpacking and they just drink water all day long, and they don't necessarily stop to get those snacks in to balance their body's chemistry, and that can lead to some really dangerous things. Fun fact, more rescues happen in the Grand Canyon from people overhydrating and getting hyponatremia than they do of people getting dehydrated. So make sure you balance out your proper hydration with good nutrition. Next up on my list of many mistakes that I have made, this summer even, I made a string of highly embarrassing mistakes that all involved not bringing the right gear. I was backpacking in South Dakota, and on one of my backpacking trips, I forgot my headlamp. And immediately after that, I did another overnight and proceeded to completely forget my sleeping mattress. Just didn't bring it. So I just slept on the cold, hard ground and laid out a couple of basically some clothes underneath my sleeping bag. This was not well done on my part. And my error was that I got out of my routine. and I didn't verify, I didn't double check, I didn't use a checklist or anything like that. Because I've been backpacking so many times, I tend to just think, nah, it'll be fine, I've got it, I'm sure I didn't forget anything. However, I definitely forgot some important things that I don't recommend forgetting. It's not fun to not have a sleeping mattress or a sleeping pad. It's a bad night of sleep. So the lesson there is double check and use a checklist. More gear related blunders that I've had is, you see this wall of shoes behind me? Well, that means I'm testing lots of footwear out all the time. And I was on a backpacking trip in the Wind River Range in Wyoming a couple years ago and proceeded to take a brand new pair of shoes that I'd never tried on before and just assumed that they would fit me well. And I had to do like 50 miles of backpacking with brand new shoes that I hadn't verified. Turns out they were a half size too small, and I got all of my toes had blisters on them. It was one of the most miserable backpacking trips I've ever taken from a pain standpoint. I was so uncomfortable on this trip because I didn't verify the fact that my gear worked. So if you're out there and you're buying gear, don't have the trailhead be the very first time that you put on your backpack, put on your shoes, try to set up your tent, those kinds of things. It is definitely a great idea to check your stuff at home, go out for like a 2 to 3 mile test, try out those shoes, make sure they fit, carry your backpack, things like that, because you don't want to find out when you're on the trail and you have a load of miles to go that, oops, what you have is not quite right for you. It's not a fun experience. Don't do that. So another mistake that I made is I was on a backpacking trip in Sweden, and I did not even think, it did not register to me for some reason, that Sweden has a very different climate than the general mountain west of Arizona and the US. So I took my ultralight backpacking tent in order to, try to shave some weight on my backpacking trip. I had a tiny little, funky little ultralight tent on the top of Åreskuten in Sweden, and lo and behold, a fierce winter storm moved in and proceeded to tear my tent apart. It was literally a near-death experience because about 2 in the morning, my tent was getting shredded by 100, probably at least 80 mile an hour to 100 mile an hour winds on the mountain. My ultralight tent stood no chance against that. It was tearing apart, and there was a blizzard coming in. I'm on top of the mountain and my shelter is completely failing on me. However, there was a mountain shelter about a quarter mile away. And so what I did was at 2 in the morning, I packed up my tent, freezing, getting soaking by this new blizzard that was coming in, snow just pelting me. I didn't have my rain gear on or anything. I'm just trying my best to pack up my tent and not have it totally blow off the mountain. And then I had to navigate in the blizzard with my headlamp on. All I can see is just a whiteout condition in front of my face, trying not to get lost, because if I got lost, I was going to be in some serious, serious trouble. Did successfully, thankfully, stumble my way to one of those mountain shelters where I was able to sleep in a little stone hut and take some refuge from this storm and survive the night. It was a scary experience, and it was just totally a blunder on my part to even try to take an ultralight tent in something that really required a harsh mountaineering tent that is really able to withstand some pressure and some wind, some intense wind, some snow load. I've had so many people from Sweden and Norway laugh at me when they've seen some of my footage from that trip because they all knew that I was just hopelessly unprepared for that. So that being said, the lesson here is just because you have an ultralight tent doesn't mean it's going to be good for all scenarios. And that's not even just ultralight tents. Even some regular lightweight tents, they're not necessarily able to withstand heavy snow loads, extreme wind. So know before you go, and if you are planning on going into a location with extreme weather, make sure that you have the right gear to match. Another mistake that I have made in my long laundry list of items here of mistakes is I was doing a backpacking trip in Peru, flew in to Lima, immediately took a bus to Huaraz, and then proceeded to go straight to a big trail up over 15,000 feet. and the trail itself needed to go over 17,000 foot passes. I didn't allow my body any time to acclimatize, ended up getting altitude sickness, vomiting, lightheaded, some real altitude sickness problems. Could have, had some real serious problems if the group that I was with wasn't smart enough to turn around and actually go down, change our route, spend another 2 days at lower elevation before retrying our route again later, and making sure that we stayed a little bit lower for longer. The rule of thumb there is if you're going into high elevations to do a backpacking trip, especially anything over 12,000 feet, it is a really good idea to give your body time to acclimatize. It doesn't really matter how fit you are. Altitude sickness doesn't really care about your fitness level. There is other things going on in your body that I'm not smart enough to know about, but give your body time to adjust. When I was a younger lad, say a teenager, I took a backpacking trip in Yosemite National Park, and this was before I knew a lot about leave no trace principles. And so me and some high school buddies decided to go off on this route in a pretty lonely area of Yosemite, and we proceeded to have a campfire because we thought that, hey, when you're camping, you have a campfire. Didn't really think about the fact that we were camping in an area that didn't have an impacted site. So we made certainly one mistake of leave no trace, which was creating a new impacted site, which wasn't a very good idea. But two, by having that fire, we actually endangered the whole forest, a lot of animals, and perhaps fire crews that would need to be coming in because we came super, super close to starting a forest fire. We had our little campfire going on, and we went to bed and kind of just let the embers die out. Well, lo and behold, in the morning, that fire had started burning all of the organic matter that was in the ground because it was a non-impacted site. And that ring had now spread to about a 15-foot radius and was extremely close to starting to light up a huge pile of pine needles and other forest debris. We were very nearly responsible for starting a forest fire in Yosemite National Park. So the rule of thumb there is certainly don't camp in unimpacted sites. There are plenty of places in most of these wild and beautiful places where you can safely do it where somebody else has already made an impact. And certainly, if you're going to have a fire, make sure you do it in a safe place and in a place that's already been impacted. One of my most exciting and dangerous tales was actually, you may have seen it here on the channel before, but I decided to take a trip in a slot canyon in Utah during monsoon season. I went with 3 other people and checked the weather, saw that there was a threat of rain, but in my confidence, thought that I could get through this canyon in plenty of time. Turns out that I was wrong. This storm turned out to be a massive rainstorm, and I was responsible for getting myself and 3 people caught in a flash flood that nearly took all of our lives. It was an extremely dangerous situation, and it could have been avoided completely had I just had a little bit more caution about what I was getting us into. Frankly, I just shouldn't have ever been in that situation at all because the forecast was pretty accurate. There was rain. Now, the amount of rain was what was mostly shocking. It was a far bigger storm than what we predicted. But again, the lesson there is if you're going into canyon country, anywhere where the land constricts water, a rainstorm can be extremely lethal. And every year there are tales of people getting swept away and drowned and killed in flash floods. So if you are going in canyon country, make sure that you are checking the weather and not doing anything silly. Have at least the ability to get to high ground and wait out a flash flood. And if you're in doubt, simply don't go. Okay, my friends, story time is over. That is my list of mistakes that I have made as an expert backpacker. And I think the main takeaway for me is that these were all mistakes made out of overconfidence. I have been in so many backpacking trips and wilderness scenarios that I have a tendency to just think, hey, I got this, no problem. And sometimes I don't stop to think that, hey, maybe I could be a little bit better prepared or a little bit safer, a little bit more cautious, or whatever it may be. So if you're making mistakes out there, know that you're not alone, but hopefully you don't need to repeat my mistakes. Take a few tips from here on the channel, and I hope that you guys are very safe and having a great, wonderful time practically risk-free out in the backcountry. All right, what'd you think of my list? Anything you want to laugh at in particular, let me know in the comments below. And if you have any tales such as yourself of mistakes that you've made, even ones out of experience, or if you're a newbie that's making mistakes too, well, let me hear about it. Those are my tales. That's my video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give us a thumbs up here on the channel and make sure that you're subscribed to Backpacking TV. I love seeing all your beautiful faces out there. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Eric HANSON. I'll see you later.